Welcome to this episode of Intellectual Catholicism, and Merry Christmas. Today I'll be discussing the ongoing research I'm doing on the new Eliakim argument. But before I get to that, I want to just say three things real quick. The first is that I am aware of the many responses and videos that have been coming out on the new Eliakim argument, and I personally want to be careful to not fall into the temptation of just producing content and trying to respond to every single objection. Rather, I want to make sure that I'm producing high quality content, consulting the resources that I have, rather than just trying to crank out a video. I care more about quality than I do about quantity, and I care that you get the best research that I can give. The second thing is, as time passes, I'm willing to do more dialogues on this argument and discuss it in detail, but I'd also like to move on to other things like the veneration of the saints, Marian typology, or issues related to infallibility. The third and final thing I'll say from the outset is that I would appreciate just patience on this as I'm working. So I'm hoping that by January 31st, I'll have the video up and running of the updated new Eliakim argument, or at least the updates that I'm putting in. And, it's coming to a point where I'm starting to realize that this research needs to become a dissertation or a book-length treatment. I don't know if I can do another 4-hour video again. And with that being said, I just ask for your patience as I try to piece everything together and make it as great as it can be. The three areas of research that I'm focusing on are first, typological hermeneutics, second, the issue of continuity versus discontinuity, and third, the Revelation 3:7 objection, otherwise known as the Jesus-Eliakim objection. Typological hermeneutics concerns the question, what are the best principles for interpreting a typological relationship? Now, of all the books that I have here on typology and textual allusions, I want to focus on these four in particular. So in these four books, you basically have a scholar who notes a typological relationship and then goes about interpreting that typological relationship. This is important for my argument because in noting the Peter-Eliakim typology, I'm also trying to show that the best interpretation is that Jesus is instituting Peter as a kind of prime minister, just as Eliakim was a kind of prime minister under King Hezekiah. So the scholars that I'm looking at are, for example, Richard Onsworth's book, Joshua Typology in the New Testament, The New Isaac by Leroy Hezwenga, The Past is Yet to Come by Barbara Isbell, Exodus Typology and Revelation, and The New Moses by Dale Allison, a Matthean typology. Dale Allison in particular is interesting because he notes other figures in Christian history who have been associated with Moses, including Peter, on page 106 of his book. I have other books coming in, such as Jesus as the Fulfillment of the Temple by Hoskins and Markan Typology by Robinson. So these are just some other books that I have coming in that are hopefully going to help me see how do scholars establish typological relationships and how do they interpret them, and then to see if the principles that my team and I have developed are corroborated by these sources. My second area of research is continuity versus discontinuity. One of the primary objections that I've heard from people on the new Eliakim argument is that I'm arbitrarily deciding what transfers over and what doesn't. So like in the first section where I'm looking at how scholars have approached the issue at hand, I also want to see how have scholars attempted to resolve the question what transfers over and what doesn't, what from the old is continued or discontinued in the new, and what's the system, what's the method, what's the way in which they avoid arbitrarily deciding what they want to transfer over and what doesn't. So these books that I'm looking at are, for example, covenantal and dispensational theologies, progressive dispensationalism, discontinuity to continuity by Benjamin Merkle, or How New is the New Testament by Donald Hagner. I have another book coming in titled Continuity and Discontinuity. And these books, I just want to emphasize, are not based on the idea that what transfers over, what is continued versus discontinued, is totally arbitrary. I think some people give the impression that the question is too difficult to answer, or they don't direct people to what answers have been given. So in this research, I want to see how have scholars tackled this question, and what could they teach me as I try to attempt to give a hermeneutic of continuity between the Old and the New Testament? The third thing I'm researching is the Revelation 3:7 or Jesus-Eliakim objection. And I'm looking at books on messianic theology that'll help flesh out how to interpret messianic passages and understand them. But my main concern with this objection is that I've just never been convinced that it actually poses a problem for the Peter-Eliakim argument. So, for example, even if I were to concede that, let's say, Jesus is the ultimate fulfillment of Eliakim and Peter is just a minor fulfillment, well, how minor is the Peter-Eliakim typology? For example, I could say that Jesus is the chief steward of God the Father, whereas Peter is the chief steward of God the Son incarnate. That is to say that he is the prime minister of the Davidic kingdom. So still then, we could have this relationship of Jesus being the ultimate fulfillment, Peter being the minor fulfillment, and the Catholic interpretation is still true. It's never been quite explained to me how Jesus being the ultimate fulfillment limits Peter being a minor Peter-Eliakim fulfillment. And I think the issue is fundamentally, as I noted down in the beginning of the video, a proper typological hermeneutic has not been articulated. We are not hearing any principles really from the other side on how all of this is working. And so I'd like to actually develop that system so we can have more productive debates and ascertain what is the relationship of, let's say, this typological relationship between Peter and Eliakim with other New Testament passages where Peter's authority might be mentioned, where Jesus might be associated with Eliakim, where Peter might seem to have less authority than the other disciples. I think having a typological hermeneutic on hand would really help us put everything in context and understand everything with its full given due. With that being said, I'd like to focus on just two more books that are relevant to my ongoing research. The first that I want to highlight is James Dunn's book, Unity and Diversity in the New Testament. This is the latest edition of the book before Jimmy Dunn passed away. And in particular, he has a chapter in this book where he lays out principles for interpreting the relationship between the Old and the New Testament based on his research into the earliest Christian literature. And so I think this will be really fascinating to have, and I think it'll be deeply helpful in my ongoing work. The last book I want to highlight in all of this is John Nolan's The Gospel of Matthew, so his commentary. Nolan is famous for actually rejecting the textual allusion between Matthew 16:19 and Isaiah 22:22. And I think this book is going to be really helpful in showing me where people are coming from if they reject the textual allusion. But overall, I do hope that at the end of the day, the research that I'm doing brings glory to Christ and his kingdom. And I appreciate all of you who have supported me in my research, and I hope to provide you some good content soon.